We're going to bring Gary back up here. So.
Thank you. Now, first an update on the next issue of Broadside. It's coming along pretty well. I got to see the page group of my own article, but there's plenty of room for more material. So if you have a piece you'd like to see published in Broadside, could be a story, could be a poem for the My Account section, but feel free and you're strongly encouraged to submit your material to, I believe it's broadsidepublishing@gmail.com. Now, as for the piece I'll be reading tonight, this is a piece of personal history. After the Uncommon Sense folded, I was encouraged to submit material to your magazine, which the Flinn Journal published. They like the material, so I'm going to read, now this is from February 2008. This was the very first piece I wrote for your magazine. And because of the changes since this piece was written, I can easily rewrite this story for use in my next book. It's about a landmark, which is now Blackstone's pub. In fact, let's see, first, Jenny, if you can zoom in on this ad over here. Let me know when you got it.
Yeah, right in there.
Okay, that's an ad for the very first show at the State Theater from 1924. Now this is a double bill, but the main feature was a silent movie called Kay the Unknown, which is basically a love triangle drama. In fact, I read the story based upon what I saw in this ad. Now, how low did the State Theater wind up when it closed in 1952? This was the double bill. Basically, a double bill of 2 B movies re-released. Got that, Jenny?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's an architectural drawing of the State Theater. Note it's a 6-story building. Now I'll describe it more in the story.
It's tilted.
A reading tower.
All right.
Okay, got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's hard to
Judging from the movies on the marquee, this photo was taken in 1935. Now, 10 years later, in 1945, sorry about this, was taken from a printed page, but note that the Strand Theater's marquee was updated, but not the State Theater's. I'll go past these so you can see these up close. Okay, you can zoom back out, and I'll pass these images around.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to move this back down because I can't control it very well here. There's no way I can get the...
And now I'll read the piece, which is
Well, when I'll
a little outdated now, but still fascinating to read. It's called If Blackstone's Walls Could Talk. The Mont Block development, along with the new Wade Trim building under construction, also involves renovating the older buildings on the block of Saginaw Street south of the Mount Foundation building downtown. One significant building is the 2-story Blackstone's building next to the Wade Trim building, but Blackstone's was once a grander and larger building. The front facade of Blackstone's is 2 stories. Actually, it's one tall 1-story. But the back facade is 3 stories with signs that it was once taller. That's because it was once the 6-story Buckingham Theater, which housed the State Theater. The State Theater was built in 1924 by pioneering local theater owner Lester Matt on the site of his Orpheum Theater, which was built in 1913 by Louis and Frank Buckingham. Matt, who began leasing the Orpheum in 1919, also owned the Strand Theater, 2 buildings up the block from the State, where the Commerce Center building is today. Vintage postcards of downtown Flint often show both the Strand and State Theaters. The State Theater opened for the first time at noon on February 24th, 1925. The grand opening display ad in the Flint Journal proclaimed that the State was positively a fireproof building equipped with the most modern theater equipment. It had good light effects, a gold fiber screen which did not harm the eyes, and touted perfect ventilation at all times. It served bubbling ice-cold water from a 250-foot well. Between the main floor and the large balcony, the stage had a seating capacity of 1,150. As the stage opened in the era of silent movies, they were accompanied by an 8-piece orchestra, and the theater was equipped with a pipe organ. The first film to play at the stage was the romantic mystery Kay the Unknown, starring Virginia Valley and Percy Merriman. Along with the theater, there were two small storefronts on either side of the lobby. The theater's basement housed a barbershop and a store. Above the lobby, there were offices served by stairs and an elevator, with the top floor occupied by a ballroom. Matt also owned two neighborhood theaters, the Roxy at 1409 Broadway on the east side, and the Della at 807 Welch Boulevard on the west side. Matt sold his theaters to the dominant theater chain, W.S. Butterfield Theaters. With the coming of television in the 1950s, the marginal theaters began closing one by one. One of the first to close was the State in 1952, which was reduced to showing double features of re-released B-movies. The final double feature played at the State on February 24, 1952, exactly 27 years after the first opening. The films were Werewolf of London, a 1935 film starring Henry Paul and Valerie Hobson, and Phantom of Paris was originally titled Mystery of Marie Roget, a 1942 film starring Maria Montez and Patrick Knowles. As the opening and closing dates were exactly the same, the impression was given that Butterfield Theaters lost its lease on the State Theater. The State's marquee was never updated, unlike the Strand, as shown in later photos of the State. When the State opened in 1925, admission was 40 cents for the main floor, 30 cents for balcony seating, and 10 cents for children. When the theater closed in 1952, admission was 40 cents for adults and 14 cents for children. The State's admission prices weren't really affected by inflation. Almost immediately upon closing, demolition crews went to work chopping off the top 5 floors of the theater, and the building was converted entirely into retail space. The Winkleman's clothing store took over the building in 1953, but the left storefront was kept for Gums Jewelers, which stayed in place during the partial demolition. Winkleman's was part of the exodus from downtown Flint to the new suburban malls by 1970. The Blackstone's men's clothing store took over in 1970. Gums Jewelers closed in 1971. By 1976, Harry Hopkins Jewelry took over the Gums space, but was only in business for a couple of years. In 1980, a U.S. Army recruiting office took over the small storefront, but the Army moved out by 1985. Oldie Discount Stockbrokers took over that space by 1987. After Blackstone's closed the downtown store around 1987, it became mainly storage space. Oldies left the building for Linden Road around 1991. The building had been vacant ever since. The architectural drawing for the Mott Block shows the Blackstone building with a facade similar to the original facade for the Strand Theater, before that facade was enlarged and given a new facade in 1919. This facade would give some people hope that the building could be used for entertainment again. Obviously, that did not really happen. But the 1952 renovations made using this space, the theater again, impractical without expensive changes. Former Blackstone's owner Everett Osher recalls that the space had no second floor, just a high ceiling with a clear span with no internal columns. Uptown Development's project developer, Ridgway White, foresees the flexible space being used for entertainment-oriented retail or a restaurant, which could offer entertainment. Well, the latter became true with Blackstone Pub. With downtown residential housing now in place or under construction, as well as the new University of Michigan Flint dormitory being built, there is great potential for an entrepreneur to redevelop the Blackstone's building. The building would get great exposure, as the adjacent Wade Trim building will have a high-profile tenant in WNEM TV5, which is moving its Flint offices to the ground floor with plate glass windows along Saginaw Street, so passers-by can view newscasts being produced. And obviously, as an afterword, you know about Blackstone's Pub. Of course, if you've been inside Blackstone's Pub, you notice that not only did they keep the Blackstone sign on the front, that Hart Schaffner Mark sign, which was on the front, you can see that inside the restaurant. And if you look closely at the bare walls, you can see bits and pieces of what the State Theater originally had. So that's my piece, and as I said, I'll be rewriting this piece for a follow-up book to give the updates. Thanks to making revisions, I can get around the copyrights, of course, anything that I published in your magazine, the Flinn Journal owns the copyright. So anything that's static, I'm kind of stuck with not using, but anything I can rewrite, I can reuse. So that's my contribution for this month, and I thank you very much.